Okay, so delighted to have a chance to be here with my friend and colleague Dawn Kinsey. Dawn, welcome.
Thank you. This is great.
Dawn is a wise person that I met maybe 8, 9 months ago, and we chat every month or so. And one of the things we were talking about recently was uh, near the end of his life. Ed W. Edwards Deming, or Ed Deming, summarized all of his learnings. Now, this is the person who had helped to introduce new methods of production to Japan, revitalize the Japanese economy, created, sowed the seeds that helped create Toyota as an amazing organization that has been an object of study in the lean movement for the last number of decades. And towards the end of the life, he summarized everything that he'd learned and all of the key points into what's called the system of profound knowledge. And insiders, the sort of uh, I guess wonks, as you lean wonks,
Is that
will
what they're
refer to it as SOPK, System of Profound Knowledge.
yeah,
Right?
yeah.
And it's these 4 points, and we were chatting about these, and we thought it'd be a great public conversation here. So let me see if I'm recalling these right. So psychology, you've got to understand how people work
Mhm.
to some degree. Systems thinking, you've got to understand how systems all work and tie together. Knowledge of variation or statistics. You have to understand that just because something's going up temporarily doesn't mean it's going to go up forever, or because it's going down temporarily doesn't mean it's going to go down forever. That some
Mhm.
variation is normal and natural, and humans need better um, systems thinking. And then um, this fourth point in system of profound knowledge is a word that I had to look up and remind myself of what this means. Normally only philosophy majors hear about this, but epistemology. Epistemology, meaning how do we know stuff? And if Dawn, you tell me something, you
Mhm.
know, this like this and this and this, how do you know that? Like, and is that actually true? Like, why do you think that? And so this study of how we know things or learn things, and to be, I mean, I think for the purpose of recognizing that a lot of the stuff we think we know, we don't is not actually correct or true. It's just a bias, a cognitive bias, whatever. So studying how we know things. So, yeah, system of profound knowledge. Dawn, what are your reflections on these? Why don't we start with psychology? I mean, you in your role, do you want to summarize briefly your role and background, the kinds of things you've done, and the relevance of psychology?
Sure. Yeah. I'm laughing because I'm so intrigued by how well he's done these four things and how much they integrate with each other and from everyday life. So this morning I'm laughing because this morning my partner and I were talking about how do you know that? Because we have interpersonal stuff going on. I'm like, relates to psychology. It relates. How do I know what I think I know that I just said? so, um, as far as my background, I think that reflects my journey. I've been fascinated with kind of what is truth my whole life, everything from religion to what we're thinking and how do we know, and how much is related to our past and growing up. So, I also grew up not having a lot of money. So one of my goals was to make sure I had some money. So that's kind of how I ended up in engineering, both because I love being on the leading edge of things and the cutting edge, which is partly what is truth? What do we know? How can we expand what we know? So I've been through the engineering track, but it really always came down to the people. The people are the basis of everything. We build things, we think about things, we create. So it kind of led me back into um, how do I integrate uh, psychology, what people know, our consciousness, how we work together with science and how we create. And then there's a part of me who really loves that connection with spirituality and science and what is truth there, because both are trying to explore that same thing.
And even the question of defining spirituality, and where it's what does that actually mean, right? Because it's there's such a long history of people coming up with different spiritual systems or insights or whatever else. It occurred to me. I'm just throwing it out here for your reflection and consideration. But it occurred to me the other day that one possible definition of spirituality is just all of the nonverbal stuff that's going on, the layers of nonverbal stuff, the that structure how we see the world, and the world of the realms of mythology and emotion and reactions,
Mhm.
and the stories that are implicitly, because beneath the conscious, rational, verbal linguistic side of
Yeah,
the
yeah.
world that we think we know, there are all these implicit beliefs and values and so forth that are, and it occurred to me that those implicit beliefs are always having an impact on our psychology, whether we like it or not, or know it or not. And but the challenge of digging into that stuff and admitting, for example, where we might have made a mistake, or how do we act in ways that are more caring or careful, or less harmful to others, interact with others,
Mhm.
because it's the combination of our psychology that's challenging enough, and then other
Exactly.
people's psychology. And as we know, I will speak for myself. I don't know why I do some of the things that I do, right? Like, my psychology is
Cute.
a massive puzzle to me, right? And let alone my attempts to try to understand other people, let alone my attempts to try to get along with other people.
Oh,
And
that's a
even in a work context, it's like, why do I not respond to this person as
mhm.
politely or promptly as I might like, or et cetera, et cetera. I don't know. Thoughts on that aspect of.
Uh, Absolutely, yes. That is the challenge every day, and I was trying to tie that back to where you started, which was spirituality,
Mhm.
and, I'm not sure if I count them up, but there's definitely something there. There is, I'm thinking of people I know who are atheists, and yet they have almost deeper values around caring for others and doing good in the world than those who come from a religious background. I'm just thinking of a couple examples of people. I'm not trying to say everybody is like this. Um, so there's something, like you said, in our background, in our own individual makeup. And oh my gosh, knowing myself, I think this is why we resonate so well. It's like, yep, I don't know why I got upset and I couldn't even talk about why I was upset. And, it's like, really? I'm a very direct person, and communication I know is important. So just understanding ourselves, um, and then how that, whether you know someone well or not, how they take it is totally out of your control,
Hmm.
which gets back to a lot of the, um, I'm blanking out on the philosophy that's really about you can only control what you control. And
Hmm.
um, that is true for yourself, for your everyday life, and for work. So if we don't understand the psychology of people and know and are aware of, oh, what's going on inside me, we have this saying in some of our classes, we ask you to turn your camera on so that, we can tell if you're confused. We want to be able to make sure that you're understanding what we're saying, just like Andrew right now. It's like, if I'm not sure if my point hit, I can say, well, what's the meaning of your face right now? Right? Because I don't know what's going on inside you, but your face is telling me something. So it's helpful to have some awareness around even just that psychology is going on, that people have their own individual stuff going on inside them that may or may not have anything to do with what's going on in the conversation at the moment. How do we be human together?
And I don't know the benefits versus disadvantages of my sticking to my original order, but I'm going to go ahead and say, let's look at epistemology next, right? How do
Right.
we know what we know? So, for example, taking that with psychology, because what he says, this is a system of profound knowledge. These four domains, each domain is individually important. It's important to understand psychology and systems
Mhm.
thinking and statistics and epistemology, but what's most important is recognizing that those four things interact with each other. So let's
Exactly.
take epistemology and psychology. You you know, you just said here maybe the reason you and I resonate so well together is because of certain lines of thinking. But how do you know that about me? You're making inferences about what I'm like, right? And so the psychology, like, how do you know that about yourself? So this question about like investigating the truth, as to use your language, investigating the truth of what's happening inside of us with the people around us. Thoughts on that interplay?
Well, I think that's what I was laughing about this morning. Is one of my favorite sayings is, well, the story I'm making up is, but that's what everything is.
Right. Nice.
I
Yeah.
certainly don't know the truth about you. And in fact, I have another system I play with. It comes from a few different modalities. Satir, transformational therapy. It comes from voice dialogue with a mod. Everything's a model and everything's imperfect. But if we model our internal dialogue as different selves or different parts of
Mm.
ourself,
Right.
right?
Right.
Each of my parts have a friggin' different story about what's going on right
Right.
here,
Right.
right now. you know? So how do I know what I know? I think I always assumed that uh, there was a quote I got from my coaching training. Everyone is always right, at least partially,
Hmm.
because we all have a portion or at least a seed of the truth.
Hmm.
So I think the beautiful system integration of all this is, how do we integrate all that? You see some
Hmm.
things,
Right.
I see some things. Oh my
Right.
gosh. If we put that all together, do we see the
Right.
full elephant? Do we see the full mountain? Probably
Right.
not. But what if we add this person or this part over here?
Right.
Whether it's inside myself, oh, I have the part of me that's really insecure. And what am I saying? And what can I say? Have the part of me that's, oh, I love talking about this. I'm really excited. So, how do I integrate those to have a really congruent and coherent conversation that's true of all these different aspects of a complex system inside me? And then we get to play off of each other with all the different complex aspects of you and all the conversations you have going on inside your head at the moment. And what do we pull out that's of uh, building energetic positive feedback for a really lively and inspiring conversation?
And for the benefit of our more pragmatic listeners, I'll pull it back to a specific work challenge that I'm facing
Nice.
right now. As I'm working with some of my colleagues, we're trying to figure out our product strategy. As my role, I'm head of product. You know, that means that I'm the one that's responsible to get a good product strategy. And so that means you've got to know the market. What's the market like? Whereas, for example, we make tools for software developers. And now, with the age of AI, dawning on us, pardon the pun, Don, the question is, okay, well, what's the future of software development with generative AI coming, and what kinds of tools do software developers need, and so forth? And my first reaction is, I have no idea. you know but okay, well, what do I know, and what do I understand about the dynamics of software development? But then that's where pretty quickly I get to the limits of my knowledge, and I'm fortunate to work with a number of very, very smart folks who you know can pool their understanding with me. And I like your very encouraging phrase that all of us are at least partially right. Everyone's right, at least partially. um, I'm pretty sure that they're also wrong, at least partially, but I need to not focus on that, right? That's because that's where the interpersonal conflict comes out. So I
Yeah.
think about, what is the insight that they have that I'm not seeing? Why do they think this thing is so important? Why am I not seeing that as so important? And this idea of, how do you think together, right?
Mhm.
With the epistemology, right? How do I know that this product is going to be massive success in the market? Well, a bunch of us have been thinking together, and we're pretty sure that we're using valid reasoning and observation and so forth. But that would, yeah, reflections on that. And
On to Deming's point, uh, one of the first things he says about knowledge is the most dangerous thing is that you think you know,
hmm,
right? And
hmm,
then the second is to gather data. So
hmm,
yeah, you have all these smart people thinking all these smart things, and then it's Well, can we have the data?
Hmm.
Let's go validate this, which is definitely part of product discovery, product management. Let's go
Hmm.
test some things.
Hmm.
And so we put out a big chunk. How much time do you put in before you go and gather data about, is it the right thing to build?
Hmm.
So again, back to the systems,
Hmm.
it's a full system. How do you get that full system activated so that you can test it and see, yeah, I think not only can we build it, but they're willing to pay money for it. And this
Hmm.
is what they want
Hmm.
as part of that product
Hmm.
cycle. So
Hmm.
I'm trying to think of the other aspects of the four elements of profound knowledge. We have just talked about data and how do
Hmm.
we know?
Hmm.
Um, Psychology. Oh, so much psychology in that,
Hmm.
right? From um, how confident are all of you in the product that you're putting out? What's the psychology in that? Is there personal bias? Is there recency bias? Is there what other kinds of biases? Is there data that validates that? What else?
If the product doesn't work, the fundamental attribution error kicks in immediately. Like, it doesn't work because Dawn didn't do her thing right, you know.
I was
And if it
wrong.
does work, it's because I had such a brilliant idea that,
Right. I told you it wouldn't work. I told you it would work.
yeah, that's
Yeah, we're so
um,
certain.
we're so
Uh,
certain. Tell me that quote again. So the most dangerous thing about knowledge is that we think we know. What was the quote?
we think we know.
That's amazing. That's really, I mean, that's subtle. Right? That's very subtle. That's very
Yeah,
profound, right? That we we believe our own perceptions just implicitly all the time. That's, I don't know what cognitive bias that is, but that's the root one, that we
I,
believe our perceptions are accurate.
gosh, that's what I battle every day at work. You know, to get back into a place of curiosity and not assuming that I know, because I only have partial information. It's a huge, complex system.
Hmm.
Whether I'm talking to just another person about one aspect of work, it's still complex. I can't know everything. So if I think I do, and I don't have that curiosity or humility to remind myself, I don't really know.
Hmm.
Um, or at least there's some aspect that I'm not aware of. Um,
Yeah, I literally don't know, you know, among the people who catalog cognitive biases, I literally don't know what they might call it, but I do know in the Buddhist tradition that is given the name true grasping, that you
mm,
believe that you know the truth. You're grasping at what you see and what you think and what appears to you as the truth.
yeah.
And that it's actually an active part of the mind. It's a reflex that you not only perceive things. And so there's a saying that the things that we normally see do not exist.
Mm,
And it's meant to shock the mind, right?
yeah.
That the things that you normally see do not exist. So it's meant to immediately generate a protest. What do you mean they don't exist? And then it triggers an investigation, like, but because we don't question our own perceptions and we don't understand that our perceptions, maybe we can move to this third aspect of the system of profound knowledge, the systems thinking. We don't
Mm,
realize that there's a system there. Now, you mentioned briefly, you know, from um, your training, that you tend to think of these multiple different voices and personalities. I know Marvin Minsky called that a society of mind, where you've got these different voices inside, um, or internal family systems, inner family systems, or
mhm.
family systems,
Yeah, I think they might use internal family systems,
internal
which
family system.
models your external family, which is why they gave that name. But
And then again, to ground it, for all the Pixar fans out there, I just saw the movie Inside Out on a
okay,
plane. I was so happy. I loved that movie so much. Do you know that movie?
I watch it. I remember bits of it.
Uh-huh.
Yeah, it's about
Basically, it's this little girl, and she's got these five little players inside of her: joy and sadness and anger and disgust and fear. And they did the dialogue so well, so that you know, um, you know. Uh, the disgust would say, "Oh, that was a terrible movie. Inside Out, that was a terrible movie," and anger would be like, oh, I hate that movie, and fear was like, oh, I don't know if it's right or not, and joy
Yeah.
was like, I love that movie. I love Inside Out. It's my favorite. Sadness is like, oh, I wish I could just watch that movie again. And they did such a masterful job in the movie of personifying those different internal voices that we
Exactly.
normally see as a singularity. But they
Yep.
basically said, no, no, no. It's really quite helpful to understand that it's a system. There's an internal system going on, the bits of you that like it, the bits of you don't like it, and that everybody's got those internal systems. So we
Mhm.
talked about internal systems. We talked about, you talked about external systems, the market, the buyers, the pricing, the
Yeah.
technology. Thoughts on that whole system?
Again, I love the fact that we do fractal here, system of systems here. His profound knowledge is a system of itself. And when you try to look at any part separately, you become blinded. But it's also so natural. Like you were talking about, um, I'm pulling on the thread if I can fully pull it up, where the brain is wired in a certain way. You're talking about shocking the system into a new way of thinking, right? But our brain is wired for efficiency. So
Mm,
it's looking for one, certainty, and two, for patterns. So it's
nice,
natural
nice,
for us to
nice,
have biases.
nice.
What's beautiful is that we have these higher parts of our brain that can step back and say, yes, there's fear, there's sadness, there's anger, but there's a part that's the director of all that and that can say, oh, I think I'm missing some parts right now. Hey, Andrew, what do you think about this? Can you add a voice in here? Because I don't think we have a full symphony going here. There's some imbalance in the percussion, and I need a little bit more violin.
Mm.
What do you see? What do you hear? What can you add to this? Adding more parts to the system that I think both provide what we were talking about earlier, which is knowledge. And how do we know what we know? Well, we asked some more experts, or we got some views from other angles. Maybe we gathered some data, right? And part of that is knowing the psychology that we even need to do that.
Mm.
That I have something missing, that I have a bias, that I need other people, or even just that desire to, well, what do other people think? Something outside me. Oh,
You said that you said that fortunately we have this higher part of the mind that can we're wired for efficiency, but fortunately we have this higher part of the mind that can question and say, well,
I
maybe
say
that's
a
not
lot of
right.
stuff. I don't.
Well, but I was saying, yeah, but if, let's say, that voice doesn't act up, if that internal voice doesn't speak up, don't you worry, your partner will tell you that, oh, actually, there's a different way of seeing the world, or your coworkers,
Oh
or the customers, that if you don't, it's almost like quality control, right? It's
yes,
almost like QA. If the developers know what a bug looks like, they can fix things. But if they don't take the care
I
to get it
love
right the first time, the
it.
defects escape. But the QA people, who are
Yeah,
like our partner, our coworkers,
our bigger
are
system,
are a bigger system.
our
Exactly.
bigger
And
system.
they'll catch it and they'll say, I'm sorry, I don't know where you got that. But
I love that because that is, again, one of the things I work on is those parts of us can automatically take over. They call us a primary self. There's a primary self that's usually out in front. And unless you're in a well grounded space and have that awareness to say, oh, that might not be the full truth, that's just one aspect of this full system. Yeah, you're going to get some correction. You're going to get some feedback in one way or another. For me, it's can often be, oh, there's another point of view here. I might not be right. So I love that. It definitely is a correction for, oh, I'm out of line here. And then the parts of me say, oh, you messed up. You're horrible. You don't know what you were doing. So I have to,
it's
yes,
the
you
internal
don't
disgust and
say.
internal anger. And
They all come out in force. Yeah.
again, I mean, the movie Inside Out, like, at any given time, one of those little characters was speaking, right? It was either disgust
Right.
speaking or joy speaking. So at that point, they had the talking stick, or they had the mic at that point.
Yeah.
And So they were the one who was acting as the primary self. And so when anger spoke, it wasn't, oh, my anger says that you better never do this again. I say, you better never do this again, right?
Right. As that's part of you
You
outside.
adopt that. Your primary self picks up one of those. And that's, again, in the Buddhist tradition, that's what's called self grasping, that we have an idea that we are a singular true thing. But the reality is there's this internal system of all these voices, and we just, identify with one of them at any given time. And, oh,
I
this is
love
terrible. What's going to happen?
it
Oh, I
reminds
can't
me
do
of
it.
so, like, as you say, grounding it back in work, right?
Right,
That's like the silos we create at work.
right,
There's a problem going on, or a team like the QA team is frustrated, right?
right,
We have to go and automate everything right now. That's going to make everything better,
right.
right? Well, they haven't looked upstream to see, well, if they automate, maybe there's uh, the code wasn't built well from the very start. It needs re-architected. You can go automate all you want. You're just going to
Hmm.
get crap through faster,
Hmm.
right? So you're
Hmm.
just looking at part of it instead of the
Hmm.
full
Hmm.
system.
Hmm.
That's again, I think it's very human and very natural, and part of what I see as our whole conscious and psychological development as we grow from a kid to a grown up, right? At 2 years old, there's someone giving you feedback that you can't just always be in a tantrum. There's more to this than why you can't have that cookie right now. So throw the fit all you want, but you might want to develop another part of you that kind of understands that you're going to get two cookies if you wait and stop throwing that tantrum.
Hmm.
So,
Hmm. Hmm.
yeah,
In terms of the silos in the organization, when I first took on my current role as head of product at AutoRabbit, I was talking to my boss, who's the CEO, and he was saying that he really likes this idea that the head of, or the product manager, is the CEO of the product, of that
yeah,
product.
yeah.
And there's some nice debate out on the internet about some people saying, yes, the CEO or the product manager is the CEO of the product, and other people saying, no, the product manager is absolutely not the CEO of the product. But the way I interpret that is that the the role of a CEO is to balance all of those disparate and dissenting voices. So the
Mhm.
CEO is hearing from QA that we need to automate everything.
Right.
They're hearing from sales that the product needs new features that'll sell more easily. They're hearing from marketing that we need to integrate AI, and they're hearing from all of the different. And the CEO's responsibility is to try to sift through, is to have some sense of epistemology, like, how do you know that we need to automate everything, and to
Right.
sift through to try to find a truth that is going to that's going to keep the company as an integrated, functioning, financially profitable system,
Mhm.
right? Because at some point, if the company can't, make payroll, the system falls apart and we all go home, right? And and
That's a
so the
big
CEO
goal.
has to do that balancing job. So the product manager, they don't control everything, but the CEO certainly doesn't control everything either. But they do have a balancing function. They need
Mhm.
to be listening to, thinking about the full spectrum of
Mhm.
different considerations. Just because it's really cool doesn't mean that you should build it.
Yeah.
Um,
And it's like, one way I also talk about, I love that the CEO is chief executive, right? And so internally, we often call that a chief executive who's trying to do all
nice.
that correlation. I think I forgot where I was going with that, but it's, if you don't have something doing that, you have the unconscious, and you get the lack of efficiency and the waste from people arguing or going off in different directions without that cohesiveness. And looking at the whole system where we started, right, is Deming was saying, right, that's where you get the efficiency. Where is the variation? Where is the potency of doing something better, of making sure that what you're putting out is the right thing? After you gather all those voices from the people who build it, the people who are going to buy it, the people who are going to fund it, right? And so that is such, I'm doing that for a central executive, whether it's
Mm,
the product manager or
mm,
whatever.
mm.
that is gathering that information and putting it together. Isn't that such a special skill set to integrate all of that and to balance and prioritize? I want a little bit of the QA right now. That's what's important to be thinking about right now, as well as 30% of making sure the customer is going to buy it. And I want a little bit into the conversation about how long is it going to take us? What's the feasibility of actually building it? So putting a few percentages of, I want a little bit of anger right now so that I really have a strong presence. I want a little bit of curiosity right now to make sure that we're covering all the bases in what we're building.
Hmm.
So there's like percentages of these different voices or instruments or even organizational parts,
Hmm.
meaning like customer, developer, QA, finance. They need to be in the conversations at the same time. And how much in any given moment does a product manager need?
Right.
Integrate and make a really good product.
Right. I mean, it's interesting taking the example of anger. How much anger do you need? The interesting thing is that very few people choose how much anger to use, right? Like
Yeah.
typically that's one of the big ones where like it just becomes an uncontrollable rage. Like I can't help, like I am disgusted by this, I am angry, I am afraid, like I am sad, I am overwhelmed or whatever. But the idea that a little bit of threat, back to your 2-year old, the scary aspect of mom or dad or whoever, um, has a practical purpose, and scaring somebody who's about to walk into the street, or about to play with fire, like don't touch that, as a very, very practical purpose. But the difference is, the way I learned that was called wrath, right? There's anger, which is an out of control reaction, but then there's
Mhm.
wrath, which is a conscious, intentional, but threatening
Oh, wow.
disposition.
Yeah.
Um, like, don't you better not do this. Last chance, right? So there's a bit of a, but you have to be very careful. One of the quotes from Deming is, the most important thing is to drive fear out of the organization, that it can have a very, very toxic effect if a leader is allowing actual anger, like uncontrolled destructive energy, unleashing that on the people around them. Very destructive. I want to just make sure in the time we have that we touch on the fourth of these elements of the system of profound knowledge of variation. And
Mhm.
thinking about the CEO, I mean, I love what you said, that, well, I mean, you said, oh, it's such a special job to be the CEO. But at first thing you said was that we all have that. We all have that central executive, that chief decision maker, that we're all already trying to balance these disparate concerns. And all of us are the chief executive officer of our lives.
Mhm.
And that, I think, speaks to, why there is a resonance between the better we can manage our internal lives and affairs and personal relationships, the more readily we can be a leader, in an outer sphere, and that the two, the really ideally we need to be doing a good job with both of those and working on both the inner and the outer lives, but not to get distracted. Knowledge
Can
of
I,
variation. Yeah, go
before you
ahead.
go to variation, can I throw in something that might help us ground in that a little bit, which is part of that executive function is holding that a vision, whether it's for the product, whether it's for the girl's life who has all these different parts, right? If people know where you're going, if the aspects know where you're going, then there's more focus, more momentum in a direction, which to me, then if you start adding variation on top of that, it's almost a little bit more bounded, right? If people buy into that vision, as opposed to now everyone's going in very different directions, where there's no cohesiveness,
Right,
then the variation even on top of that.
right,
And I know we need to back up a minute and talk about what we mean by variation. Um, but that got me thinking about the unifying,
nice.
not only collecting people and integrating how much of each aspect of whatever elements of a system we're talking about, but also, is there anyone directing where that should be going?
Right. That's very powerful, and I love the phrase. I love the term coherence that you've used a couple of times, right? Because that single concept, like what is the concept that we're moving towards? What's the target state? In a year, 5 years, or wherever you want to go, or next week, that we're moving towards has this unifying function. And the interesting thing about an ideal, like a target state or a concept or an ideal, is that it's perfect, right? My product vision is,
It's perfect, Andrew.
it's
It's
perfect.
beautiful.
It's beautiful. It's perfect because, um, by virtue of it hiding in the future, it is immune from the reality of the present moment. Now, the present moment is actually quite a mess, right? There's quite a gap between the ideal vision for the product and the present state. There's all, a thousand things we want to improve, um, but uh, the present moment, and I think that certainly for me, I think for a lot of people, there's a wish to just live in that vision, fantasy. Oh, what an amazing product it could be.
What an
What
amazing person I could be if I was.
Oh, I wish I worked at this company. If I was at, Google or, Amazon or something, the company would be perfect. We're fantasizing about partners, about what we could be like, about where we would live, about the
Mhm,
company, about the product, all these fantasies. They're safely protected from reality because they live up in our head. Now, back to the topic of variation, reality is tremendously messy, right? And so the CEO is always getting, oh, this is broken, and this is going up, and this is getting better. And the risk, I think, the danger for a CEO is that they act impulsively or recklessly. They get a little bit of information and it triggers an emotional reaction.
mhm.
They get afraid, they get greedy, they get whatever, um, and then they make suboptimal decisions.
Yeah.
And suboptimal decisions, I think, will be the title of my autobiography. So it's hard, it's hard to always make optimal decisions, but um, uh, but you have to have some knowledge of variation, right, to insulate yourself from the reactivity. But what are your thoughts on statistics and
Oh gosh. I'm stuck between telling the story of how much I did not used to like statistics and all that, and carrying on with
For the
your
benefit of the listening audience, Don does have a PhD in aeronautical engineering, astrophysics,
aerospace, yeah, which
aerospace.
required in my thesis to have to test in statistics.
I bet.
So that was the whole journey there. But I love the way that you just framed that, around hiding, the future hides, the truth and the messiness and the reality and um, the variation that we have even between people, who know the same thing. There's a difference in how we would approach it, how we talk about it, and both that is can be a challenge, but it can also add richness and knowing how wide. I'm thinking of in my brain there is a, almost like a sine curve or something, right? And how wide can that variation be along some axis? Um, you're building a product and you have a strong vision for it, and someone comes in with an idea. Well, is it way out here and still in the vision? Maybe not. Is it in here? It's like, oh, that's really going to add to it. That's going to really make this a strong, coherent product that people will understand. Um,
One thing a topic I've been, very I've appreciated learning a lot more about in the last couple of years about heart rate variability, right?
mhm,
Where we knew that there's a heart rate, your heart's beating faster because you're exercising or slower, but that the heart rate is speeding up and slowing down continuously. Like your vehicle, even if you're on cruise control,
right.
right, on the highway, your vehicle's actually slowing down and speeding up. So the car is actually, as you go up an incline, it's slowing down a bit. And so the car is dealing with the reality of different air currents and, slope and friction and this and that and so forth. And so the heart rate variability there is, uh, you know, it's a sign of health. It's a sign of vigor. It's a sign of vitality that you can have a greater, you can speed up a bit more, slow down a bit more, speed up a bit more, slow down a bit more. And similarly, every product and every organization needs that vigor, that vitality. They can
Mhm.
deal with, okay, we need to move faster. Okay, we need slower. Things are going up, things are going down. Like there's a movement and a health to an organization. I mean, again, the bit on statistics that I think is most of well, the thing that I learned from Deming was this idea of what you call common cause variation and
Mhm.
special cause variation. So, common cause variation is because of the nature of universe, everything's always going to be subject to a little bit of variation. Don't worry about it.
Yeah,
Like
yeah.
Brownian motion and quantum uncertainty, whatever. Like you cannot know what's going to happen. Like there's going to
Not
be
every
just some.
strawberry is gonna taste the same,
Right.
right?
Not
There's
every
some
strawberry is going
people.
to taste the same. But then
Yeah,
there is special cause variation, meaning like you did something in genetically engineering that strawberry or the soil or whatever that really did make a sweeter strawberry.
yeah,
And so you taste enough of those strawberries and you're like, that's not just random variation. This is a sweeter strawberry,
yeah.
actually. And so the CEO or all of us really have to be building our skill in discerning, is this really a trend? This AI thing,
Yeah.
is it just a fad, right? An older friend of mine who's in his 70s, when I talked to him, 15 years ago, I asked him, "Do you use the internet?" And he's like, and he was joking, but he said, "I think it's just a fad. It's going to go away." Right.
Yeah,
So which hype cycles do you pay attention to? Which ones do you not pay attention to? Which
yeah,
bad
I think
news do you pay attention to?
that goes to just what you were saying about the CEO and the psychology of, is that variation, how are they going to handle whoever's making that decision? Are they going to, see it as a special variation,
Right.
something to be worried about or really focused on? We
Right.
spend a lot of time on it, which that's a whole nother conversation, is what we see in corporations as far as what gets the focus. Is it those special things, or is it the natural variation between strawberries or between how developers write code?
Right.
And, what Deming was pointing out is most of the improvement can be had if you look at the common natural inherent variations in the system. Coder to coder, there's going to be a difference, but how do we create a system
Right.
that has guardrails that make that okay and safe, that the variation doesn't go outside of the bounds, but that also we might be able to improve the system so that that variability maybe even adds richness to it, or adds, like we were saying, right, the diversity that we need by having different points of view or something. But that most of us, by reflex, look at it as special variation and try to put things into place that damp it down or make it worse, or make it so we waste our time making an improvement that's for a very small thing that will rarely happen. So I think you and I started discussing this system of profound knowledge, I hadn't really thought as much about variation and its, how you think about it. The way you solve a problem depends on the kind of variation and how you're thinking about that. Well, there's a lot of bias there in me. Everything we're talking about is like, yeah, I say a lot of this, but can I actually do it? So, yeah.
Well, one thing that occurred to me recently is that emotional volatility, like different people, some people are more emotionally volatile, and some
Mm.
people less emotionally volatile. And the a caricature would be like Captain Kirk versus Mr. Spock, right? Mr. Spock, cold, cool, rational. Captain Kirk,
Yeah.
passionate, energetic, live, vibrant, and um, and some people can be like quite, a bit emotionally unstable or volatile or whatever else. And one uh, one good question always to ask is, there must be some evolutionary benefit that we all ended up,
Mm.
with these tendencies, right? Because I think we're in our society has certainly given some primacy to the cold, cool, rational
Mm.
state of mind, but the more sort of passionate, evocative, artistic side of mind must have some evolutionary benefit as well. And one possibility would be the responsiveness to, these to change. So things are going well, they get excited. Things are going poorly, they
Mm.
get depressed or angry or whatever. Um, as opposed to the really cold, cruel, rational
Mm.
folks, they're almost inert, right? It's like, we were talking about special cause versus common cause variation. Some people just don't care. They're just inert. They're just like, I don't know, going up, we're losing customers, we're gaining customers. I don't,
Not
I'm
enough.
not gonna be thrown off by that. And you can go to an extreme, right? You can be too cool, too emotionally detached to
Yeah.
make the best decisions.
Where my brain goes with that is that, yes, evolutionary may have been there, but the only way we could have survived if there was a variety in the
Right,
system.
right,
So if you didn't have art people to inspire and help us innovate,
right,
but then if you didn't have the people who were in the middle
right,
kind of inert saying, okay, but come back, if we
right,
keep going that direction, we're not going to have any food at all. We need some
right,
safety
right,
back here. So we can't grow all genetically engineered strawberries because if they fail or they poison us, right,
right,
we need to keep our base strawberry for a while.
right.
So I love that. It, yeah, the psychology of how did we each evolve? It goes back to what you and I talked about one time about strengths finders, right? How
Okay.
do we leverage our innate
Right,
strengths so that it doesn't make it bad to be a very reactive person who brings the inspiration and then the depth of emotion. And
right,
it doesn't make it bad if someone is just like, no, I'm stable able. You can tell me anything and it's okay.
right. Right, right, exactly. That the judgment there, if we say that that's bad, that's just this disgust person. Oh, you shouldn't be like that. You shouldn't be so cold and rational. You shouldn't be so passionate, fiery, emotional. That's just the disgust voice saying,
Mm.
and so kind of taking us back to we've got the inner systems moving inside of us, subject to variation, trying to figure out what the heck is going on. And then we have the outer systems, including all of us working together, trying to figure out how to merge our various different psychologies, especially the modern workplace. We're working virtually where, you and I have never met in person. I've not met many of my coworkers in person.
Yeah, yeah.
Um, and we're from different cultures and different backgrounds. So you've got these great diversity of psychology and background, and we're trying to make it work. We're trying to make companies work and have a good conversation. And it's a system of systems. The technical term from Russell Ackoff, a system of systems, is called a mess. And that literally is the term for a system of systems. And
Like
that
a
is exactly, does that feel accurate?
I feel accurate to me internally. I often feel like a mess. I feel like
Yeah.
work is
Well,
often a
the
mess.
companies feels like a mess. The
I hadn't
market feels like
heard
the
that.
world feels like a mess.
That's great. The system of systems is a mess.
All right. So final conclusion, wonderful conversation, Don. Thank you so much. We concluded that the world is a mess, but I think that the system of profound knowledge is a great way for us to try to make sense of this mess that we're all.
I think that was a beautiful way to summarize it.
Thanks so much.
That was
Till
great.
next
Thank
time.
you. Till
Thank you.
next time.